Hello everyone, now we begin with a man standing perfectly still, his hand gently resting on a steel gate, the kind that hums faintly from the tension of decades-old welds and the weight of unseen stories. The sun is sharp today, casting long, straight shadows from the concrete pillars of a federal building. You hear laughter. It's not cruel yet, but it's dismissive. Measured. Like a group of men in black tactical uniforms sizing up a mop bucket and deciding whether it's worth kicking. He's there every day, this man. Wrinkled coat, boots too polished for his age. A thermos. A radio tuned to soft gospel. And a name badge clipped to a jacket that's seen better wars. You see him and think, maybe he's maintenance. Maybe he's lost. Maybe both. You probably won't survive this story with your assumptions intact, so, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and local time in the comments, it's always wild to see where you're watching from. Now, relax, maybe turn on the fan for some soothing noise, and let's get into today's story. The old man is always early. He unlocks the outer gate with a code, even though no one really needs him to anymore. The system is digital now. Facial recognition. Retina scans. But he still shows up. Maybe it's habit. Maybe it's hope. This particular Tuesday, the black Suburbans roll in hard and fast, more than usual. 10 men in layered Kevlar step out, radio chatter crisp and urgent. Something's happening inside. The kind of something that needs a perimeter. The old man steps aside, nods like he always does. But this time, he gets looked at. Really looked at. One of the younger officers nudges another and says it loud enough for the man to hear, "Hey, is that our new janitor? Or did they just let someone's grandpa wander into restricted zones?" There's laughter. A few glance over but don't intervene, another chimes in, better check his fanny pack, might be hiding state secrets in his Werther's originals. The old man says nothing. He just sips from the thermos. Keeps his eyes on the entrance, then, the commanding officer steps up. Not to stop the jokes, but to see what the old man is doing there at all. "You with the building?" He asks, the man nods. Badge should say enough. The officer barely glances at it. "We're setting up a tactical net. This area is going to be hot for a while. You need to stay back." The old man raises an eyebrow. "Copy that." The younger officers chuckle. One mimics his voice, "Copy that." They love the echo of their own arrogance. You can smell it like gun oil and ego, but the man doesn't flinch. He just keeps watching. 5 minutes pass. Then 10. Inside the building, something is going wrong, too many radios, too many pacing feet. And then something in the air shifts, one of the SWAT guys hears it first. "Hey, was that a single round?" The old man doesn't even look up from his seat. "Not just one," he says. "That was a 3-round burst. M4. Suppressed." Echoed wrong off the rear concrete, means he's in the east corridor. They freeze. Every man in black turns toward him like he's just grown antlers. "What did you say?" The commanding officer asks. The old man finally rises. Slow, like his bones remember everything they've been through. He steps up to the edge of the staging perimeter and says 5 calm words. "He's already behind your flank." Time stops. The radios go dead quiet. The SWAT team, trained to never take civilian input seriously during an op, suddenly finds itself stalled by the sheer conviction in the man's voice. He doesn't offer backup. Doesn't wave credentials. He just locks eyes with the team leader and nods once. "You want this done clean. You cut him off now. Back corridor. Use fire exit G7, won't be alarmed. You're about 30 seconds from one of your boys walking into a fatal funnel, no one moves." The senior officer's eyes twitch, then the call comes in over comms. "We've got movement, back flank, he's headed for the garage access." Silence, the commanding officer stares at the old man like he's staring at a ghost. "Who the hell are you?" The man takes a long sip from his thermos and mutters, "Not the janitor." And just like that, the men who mocked him shift posture. Not out of embarrassment. Out of fear. Respect. Confusion. Some kind of cocktail they've never tasted before. One of them leans in and whispers, "That guy, he just ID'd suppressed rounds through 2 layers of concrete and echo feedback." Who does that? And the commander only mutters, somebody we should have saluted walking in. But the old man doesn't bask in it. Doesn't correct them. He just watches the tactical team adjust their path, radios now alive with urgency and direction that, oddly, match exactly what he said. As they rush to the far exit, one young officer lingers. Not mocking now, curious. He looks at the man like he's trying to reconcile two universes, the one where old men sit and decay, and the one where legends walk in unassuming boots, seriously. Who are you? The old man doesn't even look over, someone who's seen this play out. A few times too many. He didn't plan to come back to this place. After Kandahar, he swore off institutions, federal or otherwise. The paperwork, the medals, the formal thank you that never seemed to reach his bones. But somehow, this quiet building with its chain-link gates and predictable routines gave him something war never could, silence. Not peace, mind you, he never trusted that word. But silence, the kind you can lean into without flinching. His name is Gerald Knox. A name that once echoed through satellite radios in the middle of blackout missions, now reduced to a plastic badge with a smudged photo and the wrong job title. He doesn't correct anyone anymore. Maybe because there's no one left to remember the corrections. 20 years earlier, Knox wasn't sipping from thermoses and giving warnings. He was Captain Knox, 5th Group Special Forces, Task Force 121. You didn't call for him unless you were already deep in hell and the map was on fire. Kandahar, 2004. A compound raid had gone sideways. Intel said 10 insurgents, maybe 12. Turned out to be over 40. Knox's unit was pinned down in a half-collapsed mud structure, radios jammed, their Afghan interpreter bleeding out in the corner. No way out, he could hear them chanting outside. Not in anger, but in celebration. The kind of noise men make when they know they've already won. Knox had 12 men under his command. One of them was 19 years old. From Tallahassee, and hadn't written his mom back in weeks. Knox remembered him trembling, hiding it behind clenched teeth. "We're not going out like this," Knox whispered, low enough that only the sand heard it. He crawled to the breach, pulled off the dead man's vest and studied the terrain through a cracked thermal scope. The hostiles were circling. They had the high ground, the numbers, and time. But Knox had something else. He ordered a heat burst, used the last of their thermobaric rounds to simulate an accidental detonation. Then, during the chaos, he led his men through an underground drainage shaft they'd used on insertion. Most commanders would have forgotten it. Knox had memorized its bend ratios the night before. They lost 1 man. Saved 11. Recovered the wounded interpreter. And left a crater that became its own legend in whispered military lore, but the war didn't stop after one escape. Knox went back in. Again. And again. Until one mission didn't go sideways, it just never ended. Bagram. 2006, he was assigned to extract a diplomat's son, kidnapped by a splinter faction pretending to be Taliban. Knox knew the difference. Knew the signs. He told command it wasn't Taliban, it was a rogue ex-CIA asset gone native. No one listened, they went in anyway. 2 of his men died from booby-trapped claymores. The diplomat's son was already dead, days earlier. The mission was just a cleanup, and no one told Knox. He punched a superior officer when he got back. They called it insubordination. He called it grief. The commendation that followed felt like an insult. He left. No fanfare. No retirement parade. Just a quiet severance package and a letter that began with, "On behalf of a grateful nation." He tried civilian life for a while. Didn't work. Security jobs paid well but felt like bad theater. Everyone wanted a hero on their resume, not in their parking lot, until one day, the federal building's maintenance supervisor, an old buddy from his ranger days, called him up and said, "You want a post where no one will ask questions and no one cares who you were? Just a gate. Just a thermos. That's it." So he showed up. Years passed. People forgot. Suits walked by him every day with lattes and legal briefs. Some offered awkward nods. Most ignored him. And Knox didn't mind, but not everyone forgot. There were whispers. A young federal marshal once dropped his coffee when he saw Knox and stammered, "Sir, are you the Knox?" The man didn't answer. He just nodded once, and the young officer stood straighter for the rest of the month. and then there was the woman with the burn scar down her right arm who came by once a year, always on November 11th, and left a single white rose at the base of the west gate where Knox sat. She never said a word. He never asked, because he knew exactly who she was. Kandahar, 2004. She was one of the civilians inside the compound when it went up. They weren't just insurgents, some of them were traffickers. Knox's raid hadn't just been a rescue, it had been a liberation. The woman had been 15 then. She remembered the face of the soldier who cut through her chains and said, "You're not invisible anymore." Knox remembered saying it. Never thought he'd see her again, but she did come back. Every year. No fanfare. Just a rose. And silence. Back in the present, after the SWAT team moved toward the flank, Knox returned to his chair like nothing happened. The radios crackled. The takedown happened clean. No casualties. One suspect. Armed and subdued, the commander walked back outside, this time his face different. Like someone had seen a constellation where before there was just sky. Knox didn't say anything, but in the quiet after the chaos. One of the young officers came over with a bottle of cold water. "Sir," he said quietly. "Can I ask? Why didn't you just tell us who you were?" Knox chuckled, "Just once. Because you wouldn't have believed me." And the kid nodded like that made all the sense in the world. The funny thing about silence is that it teaches you how to listen, not just to noise, but to the weight behind it. Knox had been listening for most of his life. To heartbeats under floorboards. To the subtle click of a rifle safety when someone's lying. To the panic in a young soldier's breath when everything's about to go sideways. So when the SWAT team mocked him at the gate, he didn't hear cruelty, he heard inexperience. He heard the kind of confidence that only comes when you've never had to earn your second breath, and that's why, when he said those 5 words, "He's already behind your flank," he said them like a man who had once whispered across satellite delay to warn a Blackhawk pilot that the LZ had shifted 200 meters east into a kill box. The moment those words landed, the world shifted. Inside the building, the suspect had a 5-minute lead. He'd entered through a security breach 2 floors up. Knocked out a guard. Took his uniform. Pretended to be a contractor. Smart guy. But he made one mistake. He walked past the gate without meeting Knox's eyes. Knox knew that move. Knew it from every warzone, every checkpoint, every kid with a pressure switch hidden under a vest. The eyes always gave it away. When the man passed him, shoulders tight, breath shallow, Knox logged him. Didn't confront. Didn't warn. Just watched. Measured the rhythm of his stride. The wrinkle in his left pant leg where a concealed holster shifted with each step. That's how he knew. That's why, when the team leader barked orders based on blueprints and protocol, Knox had already triangulated the perp's route based on old floor schematics no one used anymore. He didn't need a radio, he remembered, while the SWAT team moved, still catching up to the reality Knox laid out, something else happened, a secondary breach, another contractor went missing. That's when the tension snapped like a dry bone. The commander stepped out again, eyes tight. No more mockery. Just pressure. He looked at Knox and asked flatly, "How many are there?" Knox didn't answer right away. He just stared at the badge on the man's chest, then said quietly, "2-man job. Diversion, then extraction. Probably someone on the inside helping them, maybe in IT, maybe janitorial. You're focusing on the shooter, but that's not the prize." The officer's voice was shaky now. "Then what is?" Knox's eyes darkened. The server room. 10 seconds later, alarms started blaring inside. A woman came running, mid-level security officer, young, rattled. Someone triggered a silent override. South corridor, internal systems are being accessed without credentials. The commander didn't hesitate this time. Move. Go. Lock it down. But Knox stayed. He didn't need to move. His war wasn't in the server room. It was here, at the breach. At the place no one had protected because they never thought to, until they remembered the man who'd been watching it all along. Then came the second moment, the real test. As chaos swirled inside, one of the 2 intruders, the tech guy, not the shooter, made a break for the exit. He had what he needed, a flash drive, some kind of extracted data, and the only thing standing between him and freedom was an old man with a badge and a thermos. No vest, no gun, just silence. The man ran toward the gate. Half hunched, hoodie pulled low. Knox watched. Waited. Counted his steps, then he moved, not fast, not dramatic. Just a sidestep, one that placed his boot directly in front of the runner's leading foot. The man tripped, hard. Rolled. Tried to recover, but Knox was already on top of him. It didn't look like a tackle. More like gravity suddenly chose sides. With one knee on the runner's back and one hand twisting the man's wrist into an impossible angle, Knox leaned in and whispered something no one else heard. The suspect went limp. By the time the SWAT team arrived, the flash drive was already in Knox's pocket. He handed it to the commander without a word. They looked at him now like you'd look at a man who just turned water into wine using only a thermos and bad knees. The commander cleared his throat. "You took down a trained asset." Knox didn't flinch. "No. I reminded him there's always someone who's watched more pain than you've imagined." The silence lingered. Finally, the young officer, the same one who had offered him a bottle of water earlier, spoke up. "What? What did you say to him? Before he went limp?" Knox looked at him, something behind his eyes colder than war. "I told him I knew his recruiter." That shut them up. The SWAT team processed the data. Turned out it was a partial list of federal witness names in protection. Had that flash drive left the premises, dozens of people, families, would have been exposed to cartel retaliation, and no one, not one person, had noticed the breach. Except the janitor at the gate. Later, after reports were filed and the official story was written in clean, politically correct language, the team gathered near the outer fence. They didn't say much, but each one of them, every man who had mocked him, walked up to Knox, shook his hand, and nodded. Some mumbled "sir." One saluted. Knox didn't return the salute. He just nodded once, sipped from his thermos, and looked past them to the quiet skyline. He didn't need thanks, he needed the job to be done right, and this time, it was. You wouldn't think a gate matters much. Most folks pass through it with their heads buried in their phones, earbuds in, ignoring the world, ignoring him. To them, Knox is a wrinkle in the landscape, a fixture like a flagpole or fire extinguisher. Present, but not part of the story, but the gate is where it all begins, and ends. You learn a lot from who rushes through and who lingers. The liars look down. The dangerous ones look straight through you. But the ones who need saving, they almost always glance back. Knox had learned their patterns, memorized their rhythms. Not because he wanted to spy, but because he'd seen what happens when no one's watching. That's what had haunted him since Bagram. See, the mission he couldn't shake wasn't the one that broke him. It was the one where he didn't act fast enough. A 6-year-old girl. 1 second too late. A red scarf, a pressure plate. Her blood stained his boots for 2 days before they burned them in a pit. That's why he stayed at the gate. Not for nostalgia. Not for pension, because if just once, if just one time, he could stop someone else from making that mistake, then maybe the kid's name wouldn't echo every time he closed his eyes. 2 weeks after the breach, things changed, small things. At first, the maintenance crew stopped walking past him like he was furniture. The mailroom kid brought him an extra sandwich one morning. A secretary from the 3rd floor left a thank you note folded like origami, slid under his elbow as she passed, but it wasn't just kindness, it was awareness. People started looking again. Eye contact. Head nods. Questions. Even the building's internal threat assessment protocols were revised. They named it Knox's flank, a new standard operating procedure to check for unseen angles during breaches. He didn't smile when they told him, he just muttered, "Took you long enough." But something deeper started shifting. One day, a father and his young son came through security. The boy was maybe 7, wide-eyed, bouncing with energy, dragging a Transformer's backpack. As they passed Knox's post, the boy stopped and looked up. "You in the army?" The boy asked. The father gave a polite smile. "Don't bother the man, buddy." Knox didn't answer right away. He looked at the kid, really looked. His hands were clean, his shoes tied in perfect double knots. "Safe, I was," Knox said finally. "A long time ago." The boy squinted. "Did you fight bad guys?" Knox nodded. "Once or twice." The kid thought about that, then gave a solemn nod, as if he'd just been trusted with state secrets. "Cool. I want to be a hero too." Knox looked away. The word hero always sat wrong in his mouth. It tasted like all the names on all the plaques no one visits anymore, but he didn't correct the boy. let him hold that dream, at least for now. When they left, the father circled back. Quietly, I don't know what you did. But my brother's a marshal here. Said you saved lives. Knox shrugged. Just said 5 words. No, the man said. You meant 5 words. And then, finally, a larger change came. The building offered him a new position, something behind a desk. Better pay. Climate control. A shiny badge that said Senior Threat Consultant. It came with a chair that didn't squeak and a view of the courtyard. He declined. Gates don't watch themselves, he said, and when they pressed him, he added, I don't sit with my back to doors. So they let him stay. Even gave him a heater for winter, and an emergency alert button, something he didn't need but appreciated anyway. But not all changes were external. Knox found himself talking more. Nothing long, he wasn't a poet, but enough to let people know he was still in there. A war vet who'd survived things no one should see but who still believed a coffee shared with a stranger could defuse 100 quiet tragedies. He started recognizing regulars. The nervous intern who triple-checked her ID badge. The lobby janitor who whistled Sinatra between mopping passes. The immigration lawyer who always wore 2 different socks and didn't seem to know it. He knew their patterns. Their tells. Their burdens, and sometimes, he stepped in. One day, a man in a suit brushed past security too quickly. Nothing illegal, just wrong. His walk was erratic. Eyes darting. Sweat on the collar despite the air conditioning. Knox intercepted him. Forgot something? He asked, voice calm but firm. The man stammered. Said he was late. Then bolted. Inside his bag, a loaded Glock, a forged ID, and a folder with surveillance photos of an assistant district attorney. That incident never made the news, because it didn't need to. Knox stopped it before it started. The headlines wouldn't mention the gate. Or the man. Or the 5-second decision that separated disaster from another Tuesday, but that was the point. The real battles, the lasting ones, don't get parades. They get coffee-stained uniforms and names no one remembers. One afternoon, the woman with the scar returned. She looked older now. Stronger, but this time, she didn't bring a rose, she brought a little girl. They stood quietly at the gate. Knox looked up, the woman said nothing. The girl, maybe 6, clutched her mother's hand. Looked at Knox with open curiosity, then she spoke, you the soldier? Knox nodded once, the girl smiled. Mama said you helped her once. And then, for the first time in years, Knox smiled. Not wide. Not showy, just enough to say, I remember. Enough to say, I'm still here. The quietest people often carry the loudest stories. But they've learned that sometimes, when you speak too soon, people listen too little. That's why Knox never boasted, never pulled rank, never used words to make himself bigger than the silence he walked through each day, because those words, he's already behind your flank, weren't just strategy. They were a warning. A reckoning. The last breath before the crash, but after the breach, his world didn't go back to normal. It didn't snap into a movie ending. No medals. No plaques. Just more days. More hours. More watching, and that's how he liked it. Because in watching, he found his peace. A few weeks after the attempted breach, the building's leadership quietly hosted a briefing. No press. Just security professionals from federal agencies and private contractors. They asked Knox to attend. Not as a guest, as the keynote. He almost said no. He hated suits, hated rooms that smelled like too much cologne and not enough honesty, but he went, and when he stood at the podium, he didn't clear his throat or check his notes. He just looked around the room and began. You think violence is loud, he said. But it's not. Real danger walks on soft shoes. It knows your habits better than you do. And it doesn't need permission to enter. They watched him now, more alert than they'd ever looked. I've seen insurgents dressed as beggars. Bombers who smiled like your cousin. Assassins who said, thank you, on the way to pull a trigger. The moment you stop watching the quiet corners, you lose the room. He paused, let them feel that, then, I'm not here to teach you tactics. I'm here to remind you that courage isn't just rushing in. Sometimes, it's waiting. Watching. Holding your ground when nobody thinks you matter. And then, when it matters most, saying 5 words that change everything. No applause. Just silence, the respectful kind, the rare kind. When he left the building that day, it was snowing. He stood outside a moment, watching the flakes gather on his coat sleeve. And for the first time in years, he let the cold bite a little, because in the sting of it, there was memory. And in memory, there was stillness. The next day, they tried again. The same men who'd once mocked him now asked him to consult, train new recruits, help revise building protocols. Mentor some of the younger guards. Knox said yes, not because he needed the work, because he needed them to learn how to see, and learn they did. He trained them not with manuals, but with stories. The ones that mattered. The ones they don't write down. He showed them how to read fear in posture. How to measure weight displacement in a crowded hallway. How to spot the man who wears his ID badge too confidently, and why that should scare you. One of the rookies, a quiet woman from Arizona, picked it up faster than the rest. She reminded him of someone. Maybe someone lost. He never said that, but one day, he passed her a worn notebook, leather cover, pages filled with scrawl and shorthand and sketches of threat paths. "This was mine," he said. "You fill in the rest." She nodded, eyes serious. "I will." And just like that, a new watcher began. Not long after, something else shifted. One evening, during lockup, Knox found a package on his stool at the gate. No note. Just a flat, weathered case. Inside, a single, old military medal, not for valor, not for wounds, but for observation. For sustained vigilance in hostile territory. It wasn't official. Wasn't even worth anything to collectors, but he knew who it was from, because only one person knew what that medal meant. His old spotter from Kandahar. The one he thought died when the convoy got hit. Turns out, the man survived. Disappeared. Ghosted by choice. Probably works freelance now, deep, quiet, off-grid. The medal was a message. You saw then. You see now. Still watching, Knox placed it under the thermos on his desk. Didn't need to say anything, and maybe that's the real story here, that sometimes, justice doesn't come with sirens or courtrooms. Sometimes, justice is the quiet man at the gate who sees you before you see yourself, who remembers your name when everyone else forgets, who says 5 words that stop a SWAT team in its tracks, not because he wants to be heard. But because he has to be, because lives depend on it, because kindness is not soft, it's watchful, it's deliberate, it's prepared to act when the world looks away, and when it does, when the moment finally comes, that's when the old man at the gate stands tall, not for glory, but for memory, for justice, for all the little girls with red scarves who never got a second chance. So here we are, at the end of this story, and if you've made it this far, I think it's safe to say it stayed with you. Maybe it reminded you of someone. Maybe it brought back a moment when you felt unseen. Maybe, just maybe, it gave you a new kind of respect for the quiet ones in your life. The janitor. The bus driver. The neighbor who always seems to know a little more than they say. Knox never wanted to be a hero. He didn't care for medals or speeches or being right. All he wanted was to make sure the people who didn't know they were in danger made it home safely. And sometimes, that's the purest kind of service. The next time you walk past someone at a gate, or see an older face behind a uniform. Ask yourself, what has this person seen? What have they chosen to carry so that others wouldn't have to? And maybe, take a second to look back, just like those who need saving often do, because sometimes, looking back is the first act of awareness. The first flicker of respect. The first seed of a better world. Thanks for being here with me today. Now take a breath. Let the weight of the story settle. And if the night feels a little quieter than usual, maybe it's just Knox, somewhere out there, still watching the world through eyes that never stopped measuring danger. You're safe now, rest easy.